$8.5 million bond that will be decided by voters on November 6th. I am Lori Albrecht. I'm the superintendent at the Wasco High School District. I'd also like to introduce Mr. Rob Cobb, who's the director of categorical programs, Mr. Kevin Talon, principal at Wasco High School, and Mr. Martin Lanza, who is the principal at Independence High School and is also our director of facilities and planning. Also in our audience today is Vicki Hyde. She is the Parks and Recreation guru, and she is also available tonight to answer any questions about the swimming pool. We're here tonight to share a brief presentation about the measure and answer any questions that you might have. Excuse me, I also want to mention we have some board members in the audience. Mrs. Sharon Nickel, I saw Mr. Ray Wallace. I am not sure, I didn't see anyone else, but those are our two board members that are here tonight. Please know that we are not asking you or encouraging you to vote one way or another this evening. Our purpose is to provide factual information and to provide answers to you and to address any concerns that you might have about this measure. I'd also like to thank you for being here tonight, as well as the community and your support of Measure C. Measure C was passed in 2008, and due to the district's excellent fiscal oversight, Measure C went a long way. We improved and updated many facilities at Wasco High, and when I say we, I mean that collectively as a community. We built a sports complex, made critical infrastructure upgrades, added 3 new wings of classrooms, renovated 2 others, built a new cafeteria, a new student services building, made upgrades to our historic auditorium, and are beginning renovation of the old science building. But Measure C will be gone on completion of the old science building, and we still have work to do. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of this presentation, I want to remind you of our district's vision, believing in educational excellence for all, and share with you that Measure E not only aligns with our vision, but also aligns to 2 of our core beliefs that says we will provide and maintain the best possible facilities for our students, as well as schools are a resource and have the power to transform a community, and I wholeheartedly believe that to be true. Wasco is now home to 2 award-winning schools. Wasco High School was designated a California Gold Ribbon School and a Title I Achieving School in 2016, and Independence High School was named a Model Continuation High School in 2017. As we did for Measure C, we have worked closely with the Current Taxpayers Association to gain their support of Measure E. Current Tax is supporting 5 of 13 measures on the November ballot, and I am pleased to say that Wasco Union's district's Measure E is one of those measures being supported. At this time, I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Cobb, who will give you a better understanding about school bonds and your property tax bill. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to talk to you about your property tax bill, and if I get an applause at the end of my time, I'm going to be pretty surprised. So, what we're going to do tonight is walk through some information pertaining to bonds in general, how they affect your taxes, and how bonds affect property taxes in general. Show you some examples of that. Talk a little bit about the historical context that we're in with Measure C, which was a bond measure that was passed in 2008 for the high school district, and then talk a little bit about what this new proposed Measure E in November would look like. Along the way, if you have pressing questions, we can, if they don't take us too far astray, we can address those. So at the end of each little segment, I'll just probably stop and ask if there's any questions at that time. When we do that, I'll either send a microphone around down so that people can hear your question, or I will rephrase your question, and then we'll just move through it like that. If you haven't noticed also, there's some other information and some other resources to gain information. One is our district website. There's a shortened URL. If you have a QR reader, that'll take you right to the district page. On Major E, there's a link off of the main home page for that. There's also been social media commentary over the last week, and will continue to be a place to get information. I've been writing articles, responding to questions that people have in the community, questions that have come up quite frequently, and that's all in an effort and an attempt to get information out. I'll reiterate what our superintendent also announced, that this meeting is not intended to convince you or advocate a position on Measure D, but simply just to provide information so that you can make a good decision, an informed decision in November. So let's get on with it. And without getting too far into history and into the academics, there is an importance to understand a little bit about why we're talking about a school bond in general. So we have to go back about 40 years to 1978 and Prop 13. Prior to Prop 13, if you are aware, school districts and local government could levy their own taxes. So if they needed to generate revenue for infrastructure improvements, they had the ability to do so. That was well and good for the local government, but not so well for the taxpayer, who didn't have a real good way to predict what their future taxes on property would be. And so the Taxpayers' Revolt of 1978, Prop 13, set a 1% limit on your property tax based on your assessed value, not your market value, but your assessed value, and other restrictions such as your assessed value could not be increased more than 2% a year, some other things of that nature. So once that occurred, school districts were severely limited by the ability to generate revenue. And so the legislature came to the rescue in 1986 with the Prop 46, which allowed school districts to have bond measures, voter-approved bond measures, to generate additional revenue above the 1%. These are called ad valorem, added value taxes, and they are voter-approved. And this Prop 46 bond was something that required a 2/3 voter approval, and that was basically the vehicle for school districts to generate revenue for a period of time. Historically, only about half of those passed, and so it wasn't a highly dependable way for school districts to generate any increased revenue, and they were then dependent on the state. And as time went on, California became increasingly burdened by the need to renovate and improve aging schools. We have a school here, Wasco High, that just celebrated its centennial celebration, 100 years. Many schools were built in the 1915, 1920, 1930 kind of era. And all of those schools that are 75, 80 plus years old are needing to be modernized. They have outdated infrastructure, electrical, plumbing, things that began to fail. And that burden on seeking assistance from the state became severe. And the state was limited in its ability to take care of all the schools in the state simply by raising state income tax or sales tax or capital gains tax. So they came to the rescue again in 2000, and they brought in Prop 39, which established an ability for school districts to propose bond measures with a lower threshold of voter approval. And that's typically what we have today. 55% voter approval is what is required for a Prop 39 bond. A Prop 46 bond is still in existence, but The difference between the two is there's not many restrictions in how you use the money and the accountability to the money. In Prop 46, with the lower voter approval rate, there are a number of restrictions in place that limits the Prop 39 bond measures. So, as you think about these added taxes, what I'd like you to draw your attention to is the pros and cons of a local tax versus a state tax. And so when school districts have to apply to Sacramento for additional funds for modernization, for infrastructure improvements, number one, the wait time is incredibly lengthy because there are a lot of school districts in that line. And the funding availability is highly limited. The upside potentially is that those funds come from taxpayers as well, but it's shouldered across the entire state of California. So the individual resident may not feel that pressure quite so much, but they do feel it because the state has to get the money somehow. So you end up paying for that through, again, increased sales tax, capital gains tax, state income tax, etc., etc. One way or another, taxpayers are going to be burdened to some degree. A local tax, on the other hand, like Prop 39 bond measure, generates the money locally within the district. The burden there stays locally, and so it may feel like a greater impact to the individual resident. However, all of that money stays locally. It doesn't go through Sacramento. It doesn't go through the bureaucracy necessarily of all of the other taxes and the uncertainty of, do those taxes, to what degree do they translate back to the home? And so, there's pros and cons, and this is not a time to debate those. But I know that there's a lot of concern about increased taxation in California in general. And I don't have anything to share with you that is probably going to change anyone's mind about being overly taxed, if that's a feeling or belief that you have. So, something to think about, something to consider though, and a little bit of background about why we're here at this point and the nature that school districts have to go through to basically generate any revenue to be able to do any kind of improvements, modernize their aging facilities. So, a little about Measure C. Measure C was the single bond that was passed. The one prior to that was in 1915, the first bond measure that generated revenue to build Wasco High. And I don't remember how much that was exactly, but it was like in the thousands of dollars. So 2008 was the only other bond measure that the Wasco High School district has ever passed. It was a $33.5 million bond. It passed with 65% support. All of the bonds for that bond measure have been sold at this point. There were 3 issuances. And on your tax bill, you'll see 3 lines for Wasco High. It's important to not interpret that as 3 bonds, but they were the 3 issuances for Measure C. And they were approximately $10 million, that generated about $10 million dollars at a time. And again, those bonds have all been sold. There was a large amount of fiscal responsibility that the district adhered to in selling those bonds. The debt ratio is basically the ratio in which this is like your mortgage. This is the interest that you're borrowing money. Investors are buying these bonds. The school district is selling these bonds. They want to sell them for the lowest interest rate they can because they're representing the taxpayer, the residents of the district. They're the ones that are going to be paying back the premium and the interest, premium plus interest on this borrowed money. And so we don't want to pay, I live in Wasco, we don't want to pay a real high interest rate on that. And so The law allows a debt ratio of 4 to 1. So for a $33 million bond, by law, you could allow for a payback 4 times the $33 million. Our debt ratio for Measure C was less than 2 to 1. So that was less than $67 million in total dollars paid for that borrowed money. That was a fairly good debt ratio. Anything lower than 2 is pretty much advocated as a success. Some of those bonds were refinanced. One of the series of bonds was refinanced in 2016. Many school districts refinanced their bonds when interest rates dropped during the housing crisis, during the recession. That was another evidence of fiscal responsibility, because that is to the benefit of the taxpayer, the residents of Wasco, not paying more interest than they would have had to. So very much like interest rates change, and under a home mortgage, you would go refinance that mortgage potentially and decrease your debt value. We did the same thing with Measure C. Hector, you have a question?
So does that mean the term resets 30 years at that point?
It does not. So that is a good question. If you refinance a home mortgage, you're typically resetting the term. You don't do that with these bonds. So these, to the last point perfectly, these bonds will be completely paid for in 2039. So we are still paying for them. There will not be any more issuance on, there's no more authorization on the Measure C bonds. Okay, a little more about Measure C. The gymnasium has been something that people have asked about because the gymnasium was something originally part of the 2008 Measure C plan. And that gymnasium was actually removed from the project list prior to it passing. It was not in the description in the 2008 ballot description, and it was removed to gain support from the Kern Taxpayers Association. There are large taxpayers in this county, and especially in our district. Our district boundaries extend all the way to the San Luis Obispo County line. They cover a vast amount of mineral and agricultural properties, and there are companies that are very interested about what their tax burden is going to be. And so this Kern Tax group is like a watchdog group. They look at bond measures in local communities, and they make sure that bond measures aren't overreaching. They're not selling bonds at such a high interest rate, exceeding 4 to 1 or upwards of 4 to 1 debt ratios, things that would not be in the best interest of taxpayers. If they are not satisfied with the structure of the bond sales, they potentially will campaign negatively against a bond measure. It's important to garner the support of Kern Tax, and as a school district, we have an obligation to consider the burden it places on the residents of our district, but we also have a responsibility and obligation to think about the burden it places on our largest taxpayers, because they actually pay a great majority. Nearly 80% of the total cost of these bonds end up being paid for by just a short list of the largest taxpayers. And so Kern Tax looks out for their behalf. The gymnasium was removed. It's not on, it was not built, not because Measure C funds ran out, not because of irresponsibility, because it was taken off of that list. And so that's why we come back to Measure E, bringing it back to the voters. Measure C, what did it do? It prioritized improved infrastructure and modernization. And so that's what Kern Tax is concerned with. Hey, before you spend money on athletics and physical education, you have plumbing and roofing and electrical systems that you need to worry about. And that's a greater concern, and that should be the priority, and that's what Measure C did. It replaced and improved a lot of that infrastructure. But the district's not done. It still has facility needs that were not addressed by Measure C. So that brings us to Measure E. Measure E is a $40.5 million bond. There's a lot of inflation that's occurred since 2008. It's relatively the same size, but with the cost of construction being what it is, it's a little more. 55% voter approval is required. It also, much like Measure C, it requires a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, which we do have trouble getting people to be a part of. So if you're very interested in fiscal accountability in the district, I would encourage you to maybe be on that. It's not a great time-intensive obligation. They meet once a year, but you have an inside view to how the money is being spent, what projects are being completed. You have an ability to review the required audit that the auditor does on the finances. There's a specific project list, and the debt ratio for Measure E is projected still to be less than 2 to 1, just barely 1.96 to 1, so a good debt ratio. So what will it encompass? $40.5 million is projected to go towards building a new gym, keeping our existing gymnasium as a secondary facility, practice facility. It can be a secondary competition facility as well. It would be sized to fit our entire student body, which the existing gym does not. An aquatic complex, and continued modernization. There are 2 or 3 buildings left, I think 2 buildings left that were not touched by any modernization efforts of Measure C. It's important to know that the district has made a great deal of effort to only use borrowed money for things that have longevity. So that would be the actual brick and mortar construction of a facility. And to use their own funds, the district funds, to pay for the planning and the approvals and the soft costs. So this would be analogous to get a home mortgage to buy your home. You're borrowing money. You don't borrow your money to buy the furniture. You don't borrow the money to pay for things that have short-term lifespan. School districts have gotten in trouble in doing so with their residents, passing bond measures and buying computers, which are obsolete in 4 years, and they're paying 30 years time frame. So we're going to use taxpayer funds, we're going to use borrowed money, we're going to do that only for things that have a long lifespan, something greater than 30 years. There was some discussion and conversation on social media about potentially not being able to do all of the projects with $40.5 million. So we have something called a bonding capacity. And Measure E, if it passes, will bring us to the maximum of that bonding capacity. There would not be an ability, although we could pass more bonds, we would not be able to sell any more bonds. Bonding capacity is set by law at 1.25% of the total assessed value in a school district. Right now, Measure C is taking up some of our bonding capacity. It will do that until 2039 when all of those bonds are paid off. But that doesn't mean we're maxed out on our bonding capacity. Right now, we have about $25 million available of capacity to sell bonds until we reach our maximum. And so that allows us, our current bonding capacity allows us for the sale of bonds immediately. And that would provide the funding to build a gym. We have in reserve enough soft costs to pay for the planning and the approvals, and the $25 million would establish an ability to pay the hard cost of the gymnasium itself. But you say, we have $40.5 million authorized to sell. That just means that we can't sell them all on November 7th. We can only sell up to upwards of $25 million. So, does that mean we can't do the future projects? Not necessarily. Not really at all. Future bonding capacity will allow for the sale of bonds to complete the remaining projects, and that's projected to be approximately 2022. Because what's happening during that period of time is assessed value is growing over time, and our bonding capacity is reducing because annually property taxes, the levied taxes are paying those premiums down. So they're paying off those bonds that have been sold. And so over time, bonding capacity, as assessed value increases, as the premiums or the bonds are paid off, the gap between the two is the bonding capacity, and that increases. And so the swimming pool, and then a final issuance of whatever remaining bonds we have authorized. Okay, we talk about the benefits and the costs, and then we'll take a break and find out if anybody has any questions. So, benefits. What are the benefits that we would have as a community to Major E? Well, number one, it will accommodate our existing enrollment. Currently, our gymnasium especially doesn't fit our entire student body. The proposed gymnasium would be able to do that. As we grow as a school, as we have grown, we have expanded and improved our facility to be able to house the students that we have now, plan and prepare for continued growth. It would also ensure that we continue to make student equity in this county a high priority. What I mean by that is that a facility like a gymnasium that houses the entire student body, or a swimming pool, a competitive pool that allows for diving, which the current rec pool does not because of its depth. It allows for water polo, it allows for a competitive swim program, for the continued modernization of our buildings. These are the things that the majority of students in our county get to experience. And we need to stay equitable with that process. The students in Wasco deserve just as much. This is a lower income area, but the students deserve the same experiences that other students in Kern County experience. And that's important to us as a district, and it should be important to us as a community. It keeps us competitive. It keeps us competitive athletically, but it also keeps us competitive from an employment standpoint. When our facilities are in good shape, when they're at a state where we can have pride in them, people want to be around that. People want to work at Wasco. People want to live in Wasco. They don't want necessarily to move away because the facilities are degraded, dilapidated, not taken care of, not expanded to keep up with the times. And it provides a community resource, a tangible community resource, something that there would be some availability of, and we've addressed this on social media as well, through facilities requests, much like other organizations do. They would have access to a gymnasium, they would have access to a pool. It's also a resource because, again, like I've spoken to, it draws people, or it keeps people as part of the community. And it continues the sense of pride that we have in Wasco. If you've been a part of this community for a long time, you know what I'm speaking of, especially around the high school. This is the hub of the community. A lot of activity is generated here, a lot of energy, a lot of positivity generated around the high school. And a lot of that is connected to our facilities. We're proud of our kids, we're proud of what they do, we're proud of our staff. Just at the beginning of this meeting, the nature that we all just mingle around and talk and socialize, we get along with each other. Just like any community, there's differences, we deal with those, there's a lot of positive things in this community, and they focus around having a pride. And this weekend with the festival and the parade and all that is a great example of why people feel proud to be part of Wasco, from Wasco, living in Wasco. Okay, enough of that soapbox. Those are the benefits. Those are tangible, and the cost. Those come at a cost. They do. I mean, having a conversation with one of you earlier about the frustration with increasing taxes. I'm not going to be able to, I don't have anything to debate about that. Taxes are increasing, have increased, and they're coming at us from a number of different angles and avenues. So what we have to decide, what you have to decide, is that cost worth it? Are those items worth spending your hard-earned dollars on? So how much does it cost in real terms? $30 per $100,000 of assessed value. I'm going to go a little deeper in that and show you some examples. But it simply means that if you have a property assessed at $100,000, it's an increase of $30 to your property tax bill every year, and that term would be 30 years. And so if it was a $200,000 assessed value property, it would be twice that, etc. Some have asked about the ongoing maintenance of these types of facilities, and those are good questions. The ongoing maintenance would be paid for by the district budget, but that would not be from borrowed money. It's not a good practice, it's not a good principle to borrow money to pay for ongoing costs. So those would not be from bond measures. And it's important to understand the greatest tax burden is really not on the property owner, although that may feel like it, and especially for those on limited incomes and fixed incomes, that's still something that we don't want to undermine, but it is important to know that the greatest tax burden is really on the large ag and oil properties in our district. Okay, we're going to go into taking a look at a tax bill and looking at some real examples. But let me pause there and ask if there are any questions that you might have about anything that we've covered so far.
So what is the projected maintenance cost of a pool that you need? And is there enough room in our current budget for that already?
Well, the current budget wouldn't support that only because it's not been prioritized. These facilities would not be something that would be part of our budget for at least 4 to 5 years to 7 years out. So just before I answer your question, to clarify that the planning process and plan approval process is 18 months to 24 months in length. And so before ground is even broken on a gym, we would go through that period of time. The construction time frame is nearly 2 years. And so from 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23 is the time frame at which we would actually incur the ongoing costs of a new facility. They would absolutely be budgeted. There would be continual added revenues to the budget, and it would be simply a matter of prioritizing those costs along the way.
Where do added revenues come from?
They come from additional property taxes as part of your, what I'm going to call 1%, not the voter approved, but as AV increases over time. They also come from continued enrollment. So your attendance, your general fund is based largely by what's called ADA, your average daily attendance. And so as that enrollment climbs, that would also generate revenues. The estimated cost on a pool is really dependent on the size of that pool, but it is somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $200,000 a year. That would be increased costs in staffing necessary. Anyone else? Okay.
You talked about the debt ratio being 0.196 or 1.96. The Fed rate is currently raising rates. Does that affect the debt ratio on bonds itself?
So I'm not sure, yeah, let's get a microphone over there and make sure I understand what the question is.
Okay, so you said the debt ratio would be 1.96 to 1 on these bonds. The Federal Reserve is currently raising rates, interest rates. Are the bonds affected by those increases in interest rates?
Let's have Martin answer that.
The bonds are sold separately, independent of the Fed rate, but they go out to open market. So could the Fed rate inversely, could that affect them? Yes, but they're separate sales, so they're not tied directly to any funding rate. They're open market sales, and so they'll go out and sell it. The Feds are high. It could also benefit us, actually, because ours could be more, it depends. It's an open market, and it shifts. Sometimes it works to our benefit, the price is going up, sometimes it works down, and it depends on when you sell them and where you're at. So is it tied directly to the Fed rate going up? No.
Okay. So let's take a look at property tax and your property tax bill. And then we'll walk through some examples. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lanza, and he's going to take us through a little picture summary of what Measure C is built and what Measure E is proposing. So on your property tax bill, you can really look at three different components. You have something called the general local tax, which is that Prop 13 mandate, 1% of assessed value. That's typically the very first thing that you see line itemed on your property tax bill. So if it's just moving decimal places. If you have $150,000 assessed value property, then what that is as 1% is $1,500, $1,500. That's the base portion of your tax bill. Then you will, what comes next is a whole lot of different lines, and that is all the voter approved debt. And so any bond measures that have passed, typically school bonds, would be this voter approved debt. It would show the different rates, and it would give you the total amounts of each of those. It's important to note that those are all individual lines, are all issuances, and not individual bonds. And I'll show you that as an example or picture. And there are also assessments, and assessments are fixed costs, and assessments vary largely even within neighborhoods of a community. And we have a few assessments that are county assessments, and all of us experience municipal waste management, basically the county landfill. There's also one for mosquito abatement. It's a very minor one, I think it's $2. And there's also one from SWID, the Water Irrigation District. So those are county assessments, and they're not, they don't vary according to assessed value. They're fixed at specific amounts. Then within neighborhoods, you may have specific assessments that would go towards things like landscaping or lighting or anything that the developer of that neighborhood was able to establish when that development plan was approved at the city or the county level. And so if you look at your property tax bill, you may see some things that somebody else just a few blocks over might not, and those would be these assessments. But within a school district, all of our school bonds would look the same. So here's an example of a property that would have been assessed at $127,326. So 1% of that, there's the rate, is $1,273. And then you see all of these with all of these different rates and the amounts generated, again, based off of an an assessed value of $127,000. Anything that says Wasco High is this district. And so these three lines from 2008, we had an A, B, and C series of issuance, and one of those was refinanced, and so the REF is indicating the series that was refinanced for a better rate, which would translate to a lower dollar amount here. Okay, everything else that says Wasco is pertaining to the elementary district. You see the two bonds in 2016 that were passed, both of which have sold two issuances already. And those were to fund their facility needs. And then you'll find a bunch of KCCD. Those are the current community college district. And they had a bond in 2002, 3 issuances, 2 of which were refinanced. One in 2005, it looks like. There's also one that was passed in 2016, 2 years ago, and one issuance that was refinanced. And then these down here that have no rates, these are the assessments. So Kern County Solid Waste Management, we have the vector control, the mosquito abatement, and we have SWID. And these values, $82.89, $2.66.91, would appear as constants for any property tax, regardless of assessed value. Okay, so 1.17% of your assessed value is what the total amount. So that's a pretty typical type of tax bill for residences in Wasco. It's not a perfect example. Yours may vary highly. There may be other assessments, especially based on your neighborhood or something to that effect. If you're out in the country, then you might be outside of the Wasco Elementary School District, and you might not have those elementary school bonds on your tax bill at all. But then you might have the Lost Hills bonds. So it really just depends on where you are in Wasco, or in our district. Okay, this graph, or this table, is intended to show some examples of assessed value and how that might change, and what that would look like if Measure E were to pass. And so there's a number of things in here that you can't see, and that's just helping to generate the subtotal numbers. And so you have 4 columns here, examples of what 100,000 assessed value, 150, 200, and $250,000 assessed value properties would look like, broken down by the assessment value. And so the top line here, there we go. You see $151 total is unchanged because those 3, solid waste management, mosquito abatement, and SWID, total $151.80 for everybody. Doesn't matter the value of your property. The elementary district properties, the elementary district bonds for $100,000, they total just under $110. And so that would increase based on your assessed value. Community college district, values are here, and this is our current Measure C bond amounts that we're paying currently from the Wasco High School district, $26.71 for, it's under the $30 limit for the $100,000 of assessed value. If Measure E were to pass, a typical tax bill of $100,000 AB, $1,300 and $1,322 would increase to about $1,352, an increase of about $30. And so that would be examples at $150,000, $200,000, $250,000. You see the tax bill goes up to about $3,000 for a $250,000 assessed value property. We also have some of the higher assessed value properties in the school district as examples as well, and you see what those total values look like. Again, this is the current Measure C bond, and again, this is $30 per 100,000 as the limit. Ours is about $26 per $100,000. So if you go to the 400,000 AB property, you would just multiply 26 by 4. That gives you $106. Again, with Measure C only, and if we pass Measure E in November, those would be the approximate increases there. So those are so that people can get an understanding of what kinds of increases we're talking about and what that would look like on your particular tax bill. This presentation will be posted on the school website. You might want to go back to those slides and take a look, or maybe even pull out your own tax bill and see if you can decipher all those things that we just walked through. As a percentage of your tax bill, based on $100,000 assessed property, you see that about 75% of your tax bill is really the 1% Prop 13 limit. The add-ons, the assessments from the county, Kern County, amount for 11.5% typically of a tax bill, total tax bill. And you see the elementary district, the Kern Community College District, and the high school district having about 2% slice of your tax bill pie. If Measure E passes, that would increase to about 4%. So we would move up and make the Kern Community College District the lowest part of the pie. The high school district would slide in just above that. Okay? So it's time to transition over to Mr. Lons, who's going to walk you through what Measure C built and what Measure E is proposing. Let me pause one more time for any questions on the property tax bill and what those examples look like. Okay, we'll have time at the end as well if any questions are pressing. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lonzo.
Thank you. Good evening. We're going to be pretty quick here, I hope. A little rundown on what we've built in the past. I think Ms. Albrecht stated these to begin with. We began with Phase 2 of the sports complex using some of our bond funds for that. And that was the classroom, middle set of classrooms over here, the sports complex across the field. Those were tied together. And not all of that was funded by bonds, just part of it was. So we've been able to stretch our bond funds quite well. Next, we built Phase 3. And that was the building right next to us. And again, that was used primarily with bond funds, but not 100%. We did an electrical upgrade with the bond funds. I think that was almost funded 100% with that. That was the utilities throughout the campus. Auditorium preservation. We've been working with the auditorium on trying to maintain its heritage almost constantly. And the major projects in that will use bond funds. A lot of those we use local funds or district funds, but on the major things we've used some bond funds on that, but we'll continue to do so. The Phase 4 cafeteria, this building was built with the construction costs from bond funds, the soft costs without it. So this building was part of that. The old cafeteria, the transition to the old cafeteria, the band room, and the multimedia area next to us. That construction cost again was done with the bond funds, and some of the other costs were a mix of both bond funds and not. And if you look at where we're going, the student services building, same scenario in front of the school. The new administration building, if you choose to call it that. The science building that we're renovating right now in the process of modernizing and making the classrooms more conducive to learning, a little wider, a little more conducive to a class of 30. That's happening right now, and we expect to be done with that a year and a half or so. I'm going to hedge on that, a year and a half or so out. And that will exhaust our bond funds from our current previous bonds. If you look at the pictures, there's Phase 2, that was those things there. The auditorium projects and the items we did within it. The electrical upgrade, which was done back in '67 originally. That one was anyway. The building that we just spoke of, the cafeteria that we're in now, the three series of buildings that we spoke of, with the old cafeteria, the library, and it used to be the band building. Those three were done together. And the student services building and the science building. And so you can see what we're doing in the science. If you look at the plans over here, we're going to have three classrooms here, labs on one side, three of the other side, two big classrooms that can be used for labs if need be, and the front of the building stays pretty much the same. The lecture hall loses its steps, it's going to have to go flat, but the front building, the front stay the same. That's in the process of working now. All of these are things that are going on right now. We've talked about the old gym. The bleachers we're planning on doing as part of this, phase 7. The gym bleachers, we're looking at continuing those to make them safe, to utilize this as a secondary facility. But we feel that these gym bleachers are a danger to continued use, and we're going to utilize that as part of this phase 7 process also. And that's our last phase we have on the books. That's as far as we've got right now. That's as far as we're planned, and that's it. Coming up, we're looking at the gymnasium. That's the first one up on the plan. Followed with that, an aquatic complex, a central corridor thought process, or central corridor. A bus garage would be required to move in that time. And the last buildings remaining, language arts, industrial arts buildings, along those lines. Those are two that we have to bring in at the tail end of this as we move and we finish. Here's a rendering of what the gym might look like. If you notice its location, I wanted to put this up here so we can talk about where it goes. Before we're here, sorry. Talk about where it goes. This is the football field. So the football field and the existing parking lot. Several years ago when we did this first phase, we anticipated if we were to build a gym, this is where we would build it. So that grass area next to the student parking lot, between the football field, is the location that we're proposing for the gym. This is our old gym behind it. This rendering faces forward. And now that we've visited North High School, we believe a more appropriate orientation would be toward the school, and that we would have better utilization of this courtyard over here, and the courtyard with the gym, and would be able to utilize those during football games, use the restrooms and the snack bars from the gymnasium, be able to use those during our other activities on the football field and soccer field, that would be able to use this courtyard during both outside activities and inside. An aquatic complex, we're looking at a large pool. I wouldn't say it's going to keep up with Kern High, because I don't think we're planning that grandiose of a plan. Kern High is currently in the process of building a complex, a much larger, approximately twice the size complex at Independence High, and they have another one in the books. So they're planning fairly large swim complexes, actually approximately twice the size of what we're looking at. The locations of these, here again is our campus. We're this building right here. The auditorium is this building. Football field is here. We're looking at the gym being in this area. Next to the student parking, faculty parking. This would provide entrance and parking for the gymnasium. If we rearrange it to this orientation where this is the front of the gym, this area again can be used with football and soccer activities, outdoor activities, and the parking will now become much more convenient and appropriate to park here and enter through here and exit through this area where we have the restrooms and the snack bars. We're proposing at this time that the pool would be in the area over here where we have the current bus garage. This is puts us square in the middle of the sports area, the facilities used for athletics and PE. Puts us right in the middle of all of that. And it allows for expansion along these lines right here, which we're calling the central corridor. The central corridor is the idea that as we expand, we move through the middle of the school from east to west. and that this area crosses Palm and becomes able for the area for expansion right in here. If we go back to the previous slide, you'll see that we have several proposed classrooms in here. These are pairs, so that's 16 classrooms total that we're proposing. It could be built in this area in the future. That all comes into place as we develop the pool in this area along these lines. The thought process is the gym needs to hold the campus at build out without this expansion. Approximately 2,200 students. We need to have a gymnasium big enough to hold all of our students. We believe the school, when it's built to this stage, will hold about 2,200 kids, and we want to have a gymnasium big enough. Prepping for the future, 10 years, 15 years down the road, as we overflow from this area, and would give us time to plan for the next school, or whatever the next move is going to be, whether it's the second school, this school being larger, but that gives us time to accommodate that plan. And that's incorporated in our thoughts now. Hey, where are we going? Where are we looking ahead? How far are we going? And so our locations now that we believe these would go with the gymnasium back here, pool over here, and tie it into a simple corridor process. This cleans up the campus quite a bit. It gets our buses off this campus, which we would move to another location, but it gets us actually to a facility where we have student services, the whole area, and we're a little bit more concise in our delivery to students. I believe that's as much as we have. Questions? Kevin, Rob?
If you have questions at this time, I will bring the mic to you. We'll do our best to answer those questions if you have them.
Yeah, and just to continue on with that, so that really concludes what we have to bring to you in terms of information. So we want to utilize the rest of this time this evening to give you an opportunity to ask a question. Any of us can field, whoever's most knowledgeable of that can speak to the question or the concern that you have. You also have an ability to make a comment or something to basically bring through dialogue to the school district. So we've been at this for about an hour, and we have a little bit of time here now to hear what your thoughts are, hear what your concerns, questions that we could clarify for you this evening. So we'll open it up.
I have one. Where's the bus garage gonna go?
Bus garage.
Yeah. Where's that gonna
We have several options. We haven't decided to answer your question. We don't have a succinct answer. But we have 80 acres south of town that would be close to the elementary, could be an advantage. We also have the school farm, a property which could have advantage of our presence at the school farm to expand our footprint there where we have already staffed. So those are our two primary thoughts at this time, but we haven't made a decision. We're not that far down the road to say where it will go or exactly how.
Is it also included in this bond?
Potentially. If we put the pool in there, we're going to have to put the bus garage somewhere. And so we have included as a possibility for the funding within the bonding. It depends on how all the numbers flow and what other money can come into. But as a possibility of including that as part of the move, yes, it's in the verbiage for potential within the bond.
Does it come before the swimming pool?
No, well, if you build the pool, you have to. If you build the pool where we're proposing it, you're going to have to move the bus garage to put the pool there. So at some time, we're going to have to transition the pool, move the bus garage to make room for the pool. So unless we put
first or second?
well, unless we park the buses somewhere in the dirt, which could happen.
So there are a couple, Bakersfield, or not Bakersfield Christian, but Garces has had one. They have a pool right there. Yes, those are. Taft has had a water pool. Basically, schools that have had access to an immediate pool, either a school pool. In this area, in our county, many of the schools relied on the local community recreation pools. Many of those pools were built in, let's say, the 1950s and 1960s. Many of them are 50, 60 plus years, and many of them have died. They've been abandoned. They became such a burden in the maintenance cost and added things, and they were undersized. Typically, they weren't built necessarily for a large-scale competition. So as they died, many schools didn't have those aquatic programs. But that's changed over time in Kern County. It's been quite prevalent outside of Kern County throughout the rest of the Central Valley. So if you were to go to Tulare, Fresno, north, you'd go to Santa Clarita, you'd have many schools that have these aquatic programs. So currently, aquatics, water polo, swimming, diving programs have been reestablished as school districts have put more money back into aquatics. So the bond measure in Bakersfield and Kern High that passed 2016 was to establish two pools.
So then how many would you say there is within the SSL, right?
I did the whole swim team, not just water polo. Rob, what do we have? What programs?
Total teams, Joaquin, would you be able to have a number on that? So there's four teams in the SSL, and 3 and 4 on the way. So that's what that looks like in the league. But the competition extends outside of the league. And in the county, I don't know.
Every high school, with the exception of honestly some schools in the SSL, have a high school swim.
So
That's going to do the staff. They have a pool.
right. The great majority of high schools have a high school swim team. Those that have access to diving, they changed the rule on diving some years back. They required a depth of 13 feet. Most community pools are built at 12 feet depth, and so that's why the diving boards were taken out. So the schools that have had access to deeper pools, 13-foot depth pools, have had diving programs. Those that didn't have access didn't have those. And same thing with water polo. You can't play water polo in a 3.5-foot depth pool. You have to have a deep pool to be able to play.
Joaquin, how many schools in Kern County do not have a program? I think that might be, give you the mic.
Joaquin's our swim coach, so that's.
Well, I have to count, because I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anybody, but as far as I know, it's Arvin, RFK, Cesar Chavez. Delano does have a swim team now. McFarland doesn't have a swim team. McFarland's trying to add a swim team because they have a facility. So I would really just say those schools only. Ridgecrest has a team, Tehachapi has a team, West, North, South, East, Liberty, Frontiers, Centennial, Stockdale, Wasco, Taft, Shafter. They all have them. And the answer to why those schools don't have a team is because of the facilities. I don't want to bias anything, but Kern County is relatively dry pools, whereas the rest of the state is not.
Right, and that's the point I'm trying to get to. Is that I've spoken to several people that live in Bakersfield, right? And those other schools may have swim teams, but they go to NOR or they go to Garces. They don't have a pool on site. And so if we're trying to keep up with the Joneses, who are the Joneses?
You don't have the option to go to Garces or BC or
And if those other schools don't have polo teams and they don't have dive teams, then is what the Parks and Rec facility has is good enough for the regular swim team, the main type swim.
Well, no, as far as you made a good point about other schools using the Garces pool, BC pool, some of the other high schools in Bakersfield use the BC pool to support their diving team, which we can't do here. Garces and BC are too far away for us to utilize those facilities. So we're kind of limited to what we have here in town, which prevents us from doing some of these programs.
I wanted to ask, with all these new buildings that are being added, can they consider solar so that maybe you can even start?
I can answer that one. We'll consider it at the appropriate time. We'll enter into solar. There's there's actual legislation that's passed one of the houses already that would turn all of the solar fields upside down at the schools, because all solar is predicated on a continuing cost of solar to the school districts. There's a current bill working its way through legislation that would actually lower the cost of PG&E's electricity to schools. If that passes, everybody that has solar now is on the losing end, and those that do not are utterly on the winning. So my point with all this, until you can get a fairly short payback on solar, we need to attack it as, is this cost effective, and is it going to pay for itself in a relatively short time? If this law passes, most of the schools that have solar now are on the losing end of the bargain. And so our position has been, until we can plot this out on a very short 5-year or so payback, our position is we don't want to use solar because it's not cost effective. And I think that's a position to say what's the best bang for the buck and what's the short-term payback. If solar becomes effective, I think we need to jump all over and be right on it. If it's effective and then we have a short payback, we need to consider that. At this time, it's a question mark.
Other questions or comments?
It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that this pool will also accommodate adult swim, tiger sharks, potential use for swim lessons, other adult, aerobics class type things. Is that the case?
That would be the case, and there have been questions about what kind of community access there would be to a high school pool. So I'll speak to that for a moment. There are athletic organizations, other organizations in Wasco that use the district facilities from time to time. There's a process that they go through to do that. It's basically a facilities request. The Bengals football program uses the athletic fields for games. The OFCC Car Club, they have car shows on the property. The Rose Pageant uses the auditorium. So it's not just athletic, it's a number of different groups. They go through a structured process to request the facility usage from a period of time. That gives the district an ability to budget for that, to know what kind of staffing, supervision, the structure of that program might be. So when it comes to a pool, if an organization like the Tiger Shark Swim Club requested to use that facility for a period of time in a structured way, there would be the availability to do that.
All the programs have potential help offset the $100,000 mentioned for maintaining the.
They could, because our facility use typically has a fee generated with that as well. So there would be a recouping of some dollars there. There are some, there's been questions about like an adult swim, a lap swim, something like that. Provided those activities didn't take away from the high school activity and infringe on it, we have to consider things like, school time versus non-school time and things like that. There would be an availability of that. And the same goes for the gym. Sometimes there was, in the past, confusion and sometimes misunderstandings and frustrations about the Thomas Jefferson Middle School gym that was built at a time using some community development block grant money, which conveyed that there was a community access to that facility. And although there was community access, it all typically always occurred secondarily to the school activity itself. And so there would still be that aspect that these are high school district facilities, high school programs would typically have the priority. But outside of that, there would be the opportunity for other organizations to use them. Speaking to the rec pool here as well, and I know Vicki Height, the manager of the Recreational Parks District is here and certainly can correct me or add any commentary here. But there's a desire to keep that pool available for the community to use as well. And there are some things that might be a better fit in that location. So things like the recreation swim or swim lessons or the pool rentals for pool parties and things of that nature, they may still occur and be available to the community. But that facility is aging and it may fail at some point, like many other pools in the county and the state have done already. I don't know that anybody has a real optimistic viewpoint on the future of that pool. And so from the district perspective, we're looking at it as planning for the future. Maybe that pool has 5 or 10 years of life left in it. Maybe it doesn't. If it were to fail by way of a very costly repair that nobody is able to afford to take on, and that pool is not available, then there is no aquatics program in Wasco, not for swim lessons or pool rental parties or
Simply, if the pool costs us about
$50,000 a year to run, and when you're charging children $1, $2 to get into swim, and you're not covering your costs. We also have to hire officials, lifeguards, certified people. We have to send them to training. All of that is mostly on the district. About the only place that we make any kind of money would be pool parties, and the pool issues quite a bit for that, and we hope to maintain that. We hope to keep that going for the community as long as that pool will keep plugging along. We're going to keep the doors open and let our kids swim.
Thank you, Vicki.
Safety question. This is just a safety question. Currently, we have a problem keeping people from jumping the fence onto the football field and the sports complex to play soccer all the time. So, what will we do to protect ourselves from people jumping the fence to get into the pool?
I think we would attempt to certainly message that our staff and others, when they see people jumping the fence, that they need to approach those people and ask them to leave. I'm not aware, talking to other districts, other schools, of anyone having a problem keeping people out of the pools in Clovis or Santa Clarita or Garces or other places. Our campus is staffed from 6:30 a.m. until 10 p.m. with regular staff 5 days a week. And then we have other staff that are here really until late hours. And I think that seeing somebody in the pool would certainly probably trigger quite a few phone calls and the removal of whoever's in the pool. Beyond that, there is trespassing that we can enforce by way of arrest, and we try not to go that route in most cases. But if someone's in the pool or damaging property, we would consider that. And I'll share. Recently, we did have a situation where some young people trespassed onto the campus, and working with the Kern County Sheriff's Department, they did end up prosecuting them because of the amount of damage that they did to a few classrooms and some buses. So we don't like to go that route, but if people were jumping the fence, using the pool, damaging the pool, we would message that we do take trespassing seriously, and we would enforce that. So
I've been to a lot of high school pools through the Central Valley, and what I've seen typically is security fencing. So very much like the wrought iron fencing that we have, but instead of the flat top, which makes it very easy to jump over, it's typically something that's curved or irregular or more difficult to scale. Beyond that, pools are typically covered with tarps, and they can be secured, those tarps. So unless you want to go diving with scuba and stay under the covers or run across the covers, which is something else that kids might do if they get into that facility. But basically the idea is that it needs to be secured and with cameras, there'll be those added measures.
We do have that problem occasionally where they want to jump the fence and get in, but we have been able to increase our lighting exponentially, and that has really helped. I don't know if you've driven by in the evenings. Looks like Disneyland out there, so that has helped tremendously having lighting.
Thank you, Vicki. Yes.
Is there going to be a committee in charge of watching out for our dollars and trying to get the most for our dollars when building this?
Martin, do you want to speak to the facilities committee and the role that they play?
There's two levels. The bond oversight committee, which is required from a Prop 39 bond, has to be assured, or is it formulated to assure that the money is spent appropriately, that it's spent for the items within the bond, so that it's spelled within the language. That's their charge. And so that's the first level of assurance that comes with the Prop 39, 55% voter approvals, and oversight committee who's charged with, are they spent, is the money being spent as the voters approve? So that's the first level. Second level, internally we have a facilities committee that looks at the projects, looks at as we propose to build them, that we take all of our projects to assure that it meets the needs and is appropriate for the use. And then finally, our school board is the ones that approve it, so our elected officials are the ones that approve the building of the items, and they're the ones that have the ultimate say of how we spend the money. So there's a few checks and balances built into the process as we move forward.
One more level of oversight is through current tax. Again, I mentioned the role that they play, looking out for the interest of the taxpayer and having interest in things like bond measures and how bond funds are actually used and expended. We've made a commitment to current tax to consult with them at every issuance of bond sales so that they have some awareness and knowledge of what kinds of bonds are being sold. School districts have an ability to sell a certain quality of bonds. And on a side note, our credit rating as an institution, which is driven largely by the accountability of our budget and getting through audits and things of that nature and good rating. That gives us an ability to have the best structured bond sale to benefit the taxpayer the greatest, or minimize the tax burden on the taxpayer. So current tax has an awareness of when those bonds are sold. If they're not satisfied with doing the due diligence of that process, then they're not going to hold Wasco High as a district in a good light. And what that does in the future, in the long run, we could thumb our nose at current tax now and say, well, we're just going to sell whatever we want to sell, to heck with the tax bill. And they might say, okay, that's all fine and well. But 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, at whatever point in time Measure E, if it were to pass, those bonds and funds run out, just like Measure C. And we're ready now to go back to the taxpayer. We're ready to go back to the district and ask for their support as that process has taken place in the past. They will remember that. They will say, last time we had this conversation, this is what occurred. And then that would change their ability to endorse, support, potentially advocate against future bond measures. So there's a long-term accountability there with that group. Anybody else? Okay, so we're moving on to close to 7:30. That feels like an appropriate time to maybe take a breath, take a breather. If nobody has a pressing question at this point, I think I'd like to suggest a conclusion to our evening. We will continue to stay around and have conversation with you, small groups or privately, if that is something that might make you feel more comfortable. In terms of, let's see if we get to the end here. A couple last notes that we want to make before we draw close to tonight. First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for attending. I know the Dodgers are playing tonight, taking away time from that. Sorry. The district website is going to continue to be a place that you can go and get information. You can always contact any of us through the district office. Deadline of voter registration you should be aware of. You may already be registered to vote, but this is something that should be known in the community. It's October 22nd. That date's right around the corner. Election day is Tuesday, November 6th. We encourage your vote. Either way that you choose, we wanted to just make sure that people are informed when they go to the polls. Again, thank you for being here this evening. Any last words from anybody here? Okay, we'll be around. Enjoy the refreshments, and thanks again for coming out this evening.